the session. Oh. All right. Welcome to the Decisions Daily Lunch and Learn. You paid for the whole seat, but you're only going to need the edge. So, boom.
Can we get that on a t-shirt? Get marketing on the phone.
Yeah, maybe. Probably need it, actually. My name is Josh. I will be your host today. I work for the PS department for Decision. So, yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or in the Q&A, wherever you can type it. Send it by carrier pigeon. I think in Harry Potter, they use owls. If you want to send it by an owl, that's perfectly fine as well. However, I get the question. I will answer them in the order in which they're received. So if I receive your carrier pigeon tomorrow, I will answer it tomorrow, just how it's got to be. So thanks for joining. Okay, first off, David Pitcher. Hey, Josh, can you possibly go into detail about what the process is for AD sync? You're talking about like the actual process, like behind the scenes, or you're talking about like what you have to set up to enable AD sync and use Active Directory? Behind the scenes. Cool. I'm not going to know too much about the behind the scenes knowledge, but Brian, are you online?
He's not, but I can try to jump in on that one, Josh.
Cool. Perfect.
Yeah, so essentially, the Active Directory one is going to use just standard API calls, typically to like the LDAP standard, and just pull things like your org units, group membership, and then just start applying that. It actually runs a series of flows behind the scene to essentially sync the account objects we find. It can contact both like a domain level, it can go down to just an org unit, and so you can get pretty specific with how you'd like to sync those objects. Hopefully that answers what we're looking for there.
Yeah, David, does that give you all you need?
Yeah, so I guess we had a specific scenario where I guess we did an AD sync for a client, and some of their records had an email attribute and some didn't. And I guess I'm curious, it looks at that for the email first to see if there's something there to create the account in Decisions for them to use that to log in, because what's there in that email attribute is different than what their domain is, if that makes any sense. So some of them had it, some of them didn't. And then the ones that didn't, we had them go update AD and then do a sync. So whenever that happens, as long as it's updated in AD, it should pull it, like it should recognize that and then allow them to sign in, basically using the email address and the email attribute. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, correct. It sounds like, you kind of did an AD sync, and some users got the correct account email, and then some got something unexpected with like a different domain. Are we using any kind of federated accounts in our Active Directory?
That I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. That can cause it if potentially so, if we've got accounts from different domains being federated into our Active Directory, because it'll pull the initial value. And that can, of course, be configured. But as you've surmised, if we've got some users that are coming in correctly and other ones are coming in, I guess, mismatched, for lack of a better term there, most likely the cause does lie inside Active Directory itself. And when a sync is performed, and then if those users have been corrected, they should just get the correct new values.
Yeah, because we had, like I said, we had that happen, and we tried to delete them through the UI, but I mean, of course, that doesn't do a true delete, right? So we had to go delete them through SQL from the table, and then we resynced them, and it came in how we expected it to with using the email attribute, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be kind of expected behavior there. If we pulled it in, it's going to use a different field as kind of the quote unquote key there, as opposed to the email address. So handling it that way, that should account for it.
Okay, I got you.
Feel free to send me an email if that didn't answer all of your questions about the AD sync. If you have any like additional details you want, talked about, we'll happily do that and happily answer.
Sure.
And as well, that's also a pretty good candidate for a support ticket if we'd like some assistance cleaning that up from decision support.
Cool.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? If not, that's completely fine. I'm up for a good ramble. Oh, okay, never mind. Hi, I'm creating a data type based off of an XML, but I have a prefix on each node being ignored. Any way to change this? You have a prefix on each node. Would you mind talking me through, or I guess showing what your XML would look like? You can maybe post it into the chat as well if you want to.
Hi, Josh.
Hey.
I'm using an XML, and each node name has a prefix. It's a prefix, and then I think it's an illegal character.
Okay.
That's why it's being ignored. But I'm wondering if there's a way to change that.
If there's a way to change the prefix. And when you call us, are you sending us a string value of that XML? Okay, is the XML in like the body of the call?
I'm actually creating the data structure so that I can use it within a flow.
Gotcha. Yeah, but how are we getting the XML string?
How am I creating the data structure? Just copy and pasting it.
Oh, no. When you call decisions, giving us the XML structure, right? Or are you trying to use the XML structure as an input to your flow?
Now I'm trying to build an XML within the flow, and the output of that XML, I needed to have that prefix. It's
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a colon, which I'm guessing it's illegal. I believe it's illegal to use it within a name, but I do need it in the output.
Okay. Would you mind sending me over that XML that you're trying to upload? I'm not sure how decisions handles illegal characters in our I guess turning of the XML into an actual data structure. I can't imagine we handle it well, considering your troubles. But send it over. We can also do some like kind of string manipulation before we try to turn it into an XML, or maybe maybe the case when you're trying to use it, you send us a string, we do some kind of manipulation there, and then turn it into our XML structure. But I'd have to confirm internally and get kind of a good workaround for that. But if you don't mind sending it over, yeah, send over email. And Ryan, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Just kind of wanted to type in and confirm. This is it sounds like we're trying to do the create data type from XML feature. Is that correct, Martin?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm trying to get that prefix on the output. And I'm guessing I'm going to have to do string manipulation if I can't find a way to do that, because I do need it at the end, at the output.
Okay. Yeah, so when we say prefix, are we referring to like a prefix inside one of the data fields, or is the structure named with like a specific prefix you like?
On the name. Each
of
node,
the structure.
Yeah, each node has a prefix, and it's divided. It's prefix colon name. So I'm guessing that's why I'm not seeing it within the structure, but I do need it.
Yeah, it's probably stripping out. If it's like a pipe, if that's what you mean by column, essentially the pipe delimiter, that'll probably get pulled out. Yeah, I think Josh is probably on the right path with having to do some kind of string manipulation on that and have it append back in after data serialization. But I think I'm kind of in concurrence with Josh on this one, that we probably want to see the XML itself, run some tests on it locally and see what we can come up with.
Just pasted the link on the chat.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. I just requested access, so.
Yeah, I'll take a look as well.
Awesome. in the meantime, Loreza asked how we are new to decision software and trying to put the self-service offering for our business units. We are thinking to provide them with access to customize the user portal, dashboard, and reports, and gradually add their capability to create forms and workflows for later, so they will not be overwhelmed with features. Is this the right approach on rolling the decisions? We have about 70 business users in total. 5 units would be participating in the pilot. Is it pronounced Loreza? Just want to make sure I pronounce your name right.
Yes, yeah.
Loreza. Perfect. Loreza, so are the business users that you're talking about, are they going to be developing in decisions, or they will just be like kind of working in decisions?
I think they will be working on decisions. I know they would like to have some kind of capability to develop the forms by themselves. But it seems like from the agreement within our directors is that IT will continue to develop the forms and the workflow itself. But business will have some kind of capability to do some kind of self-service for themselves. When I'm looking at the documents, it seems like the users might be able to just do like a user portal without actually done any like changing the actual the branding. Let's say the dashboard, they might be able to rearrange it for themselves. And then reports, I'm sure since the data is already captured, I don't think that there will be any harm for them to be able to create their reports. But when it comes to forms and workflow, I think we were trying to have them stay away for now until they are probably comfortable with themselves, and then gradually probably giving them some kind of like templates that they can create themselves and modify the templates instead of
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Scratch.
I'd love to know more about kind of what your use case is as far as like how these business users will be interacting with decisions and how this IT group will be developing. The best ways I've seen decisions be used in a company is there's a designated group of developers, your IT team. They are building applications for your business users to use. Now, those, depending on the applications, the smaller tend to seem to work a little bit better in like a more of an automotive, like an automation standpoint. If you're trying to automate a simple process, the IT team would build said process when the business users would be able to use it. Now, if you wanted to kind of incorporate some kind of design access for your regular business users to be able to kind of develop something that could be used or make alterations for it, that can be done. It would just require, like, I would recommend you guys get a little bit of training, or business user would get a little bit of training on exactly what you're doing so they can make changes, and those changes can be like tested and made sure that follow into like the development life cycle, right? A change is made in dev if they need something fixed, it's tested in QA and then promoted to production, right? If your business users are making those changes, that works perfectly fine with that like kind of flow, as well as having the IT team there to advise. But it just depends on the use case, how decisions works best. I was working with a company a while back, and they had their business users developing rules for their process. And so their process was super simple. It took in an input, like an I guess like an import object, whatever, and then they would use the rules to analyze the object and make decisions for the rest of the flow, right? They gave their users ability to create rules for this process. And so it was super simple. We just showed them the rule designer. We basically put a fresh coat of paint on the designer folder in decisions. So they're not actually creating rules. They're creating rules with our kind of guardrails on them, so they can't break anything. And so you can kind of lock down the browser that way. You can lock down the designers that way, so they have minimal options, and then kind of remove the guardrails, moving them from group to group as they learn. And so that way you can protect your product a little bit better.
Okay, sounds good.
If you need more details on that, there's things called toolbox customization rules that you can use. And you can use that to kind of, in the flow designer, you can use it specifically to revoke steps. So like if you want your customers or you want your business users only using a certain few array of steps, you can lock it down so they can only use, those steps, and then add steps to it or remove access and stuff like that.
Okay, I see. Thank you for the information. This is all for me.
Yeah, cool. No problem. All right. Anything else so far? Martin, I've gotten your XML here. Do you mind putting your email address or sending me an email? Actually, I will I'll put my email in the chat. Sending an email, and we'll set up an additional call to discuss your XML, if you don't mind. There you go. Cool. Okay. If there's nothing else, I can just pull up my local host and we can just talk about a specific topic if you want. A good topic of conversation that a lot of people don't know about is security. Typically, when people will call decisions, they'll need the context of a certain user to be able to call our workflows. Right? If I am calling a specific workflow, I want only the security of that context to be able to access that workflow. I want the account that's calling it to have access to the workflow, right? And a good thing to set up here is a named session. And not a lot of people use these because they, maybe they just don't have the use cases for it. But a named session is super simple to set up. And so we'll do that here now. I am going to set it up here. I'm going to set up a sprinkler. And then I'm going to pick an account. I'm just going to pick admin for now. But then once I do that, I have a name session to be able to work with. Now, any of my flows that I need, like this project snail send email flow, right? I can take this here, and then I can go to integration. And this is the old integration style. This is back in 6. It's changed a little bit in 7, but in the same thing, you can pick a credential for your flow. Any flow that you build in decisions can be called as a URL, right? Depending on the input, right? But if it's a very simple workflow, it can be called as a URL. You can show a UI if you want to. If you want to be called as a service, it's perfectly fine. But then this credential right here, and I'm going to walk through kind of the 4 or the, a couple settings you have for this credentials. And there's the first one, login. As soon as you hit the endpoint, it's going to try to navigate you to the login page before you do anything, because we have to tie whatever you're trying to do to some username and password, right? So we're going to navigate you to the login page before you do anything. It doesn't work for service calls because you don't want the application that you're trying to ping, or the application that you have trying to ping decisions and having to log in, right? That's where we hit an issue. It works fine for people trying to complete assignments or hit their, click here to open up your inbox. They need to log in, right? They need to show their credentials. Now, so that's kind of the use cases there. For name session, that's a little different. Name session works as kind of like a browser cookie. This name session is the ID, and it directly correlates, like as you saw me set up earlier, directly correlates with an account. That account can have whatever privileges you kind of want it to have. If you want it to have very bare minimum, you only want it to have access to the flow that you're trying to run, perfect. Just give access to the flow that you're trying to run to that account, and then that's all it can do. That's perfectly fine. But one thing to kind of be aware of here is that accounts don't migrate over to different environments. Now, name sessions do. Name session, you can migrate from dev to UAT to prod perfectly fine, but accounts don't. So you have to kind of set up an account on prod, on dev, and on UAT to test this. And what I would recommend is making the name session that you want to work with not a part of the project, because as soon as you send it over, it has no user context of who it's supposed to be attached to, right? It'll just disconnect who it's supposed to be attached to. So you can make name sessions maybe their own project and migrate them over when you want to and stuff like that. But this will be the name session. So you'll see login. If I generate a UI code for this login, it's not going to give me anything because it knows I need to log in. Not for this URL, but if I go to name session and then generate UI code, you'll see there's going to be a named session ID right here. And this is going to be the session that I just set up. So I can come here, copy this and duplicate or go back here actually, duplicate my tab right here. I can paste it and you'll see this ID is held. Like we don't want to put the credentials inside of the URL because then people can take that from the URL, no matter how smart they are, they can understand there's a username and password in the URL. So we don't want to put that. So we put the name session that kind of hides it and guards us, like putting up a fence, a virtual fence. So move on to guest. Now a guest is located with a specific account. So guest equals true. If you go into the security of decisions, let's go into system security accounts. There's a guest account. Now this can have access to kind of whatever you kind of wanted to have access. So if you don't want to set up a name session, you can use a guest account. That's perfectly fine. Just know that guest can have access to as many things as you want to. So that's why I recommend putting up a very specific account to do a very specific job. So you can kind of lock down its permissions. It won't have multiple running around. So then you work with session ID. That can be your name session. You just plug it in as constant for your ID. And that works fine as well. Then we have a username and password. Don't recommend this at all, right? Because I can put in my password admin at decisions and password admin, generate UI code, and you can see it right in here. User ID equals admin at decisions.com, password admin. She's going to put it right into the URL. We put a little notification in here. It says not recommended for production use. Please use name session or session ID instead. That is for your benefit. You do not want people having access to log in or even seeing any types of credentials. So does that all make sense? Do you have any, if you have any questions, let me know in the chat and I'll further discuss kind of the use cases of these 5 credential types. Okay. Before we kind of end this a little early, does anyone have any questions they kind of want to get out there, out in the open, that I can answer for you? Oh, there it is, Josh Levy. Thoughts on syncing name sessions to a landing page and autofilling data entered from your previous name sessions? Autofilling data entered from a previous name session. Josh, you're talking about when you migrate over to like a UAT or to a different environment, you're thinking about making a flow that would sync up the name session?
A bit simpler. I'm exposing a landing page with an iframe on our corporate website, and it has a user login, and it directs to a data and file upload page with tab containers, and every tab container has a form tile, and every form tile has text, number fields, file upload. And yeah, what I'm kind of struggling to do still is, so my users, kind of the user journey here is they create an account, they upload some data, then they exit the session. Maybe they return a week later, and a week later, they enter more data, upload files. Let's call that a phase 1, and then they exit the session, and then they come back 2 weeks later, and then they enter phase 2 data and files. So yeah, what I'm looking to do is to sync my saving mechanism, and also that every time my user logs in, everything they've entered in other sessions appears there.
So you're saying every time they interact with decisions, they're using their own username, right?
Right, correct.
Yeah, cool. So I mean, so you have all that information that like who's using the flow. correct? Right?
Correct, yeah.
And what you're getting when you're saving is kind of like a vagueness, like it's maybe saving a system created it and not like the user that's currently creating it.
The user will have created their own decisions accounts. Yep.
Oh, the user would have created his own decisions
Yeah.
account.
Yeah, have a create account flow already done.
And you're trying to make sure that they see all the things that they have done in decisions.
Right. Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
And
So I mean,
also
yeah,
that
just if this person is logging in, yeah.
I was just gonna add also that they see everything they've entered. If they delete something that I deleted from the local server, my external connection, and make any updates to the data, right? So,
Yeah. Gotcha. So, I mean, you have that user context in the flow ID. So if they're logged in and they have permission to use these flows and use these form tiles that you're talking about, in the flow data, you will have that person's username or like username. It says current account, right? Or maybe initiating user account, depending on what you kind of need. But what you can do there is you can use that initiating account or current account to your advantage here. You want to know what they're doing and you want to kind of give them a custom view to show them exactly what they have done, right? So if this user has uploaded a file that has created some kind of objects, right?
right.
If they've used that to create something, there's a created by field on any object that has the entity framework. If it doesn't have the entity framework, you can always add this as a field to your type. I don't know what kind of objects they're creating, but there's a created by field, and that field will be filled with whoever was using the flow at the time. So it'll automatically get filled. So if I'm uploading a file that's creating accounts from the file, right? All the created by is going to be my name, my email address. So you can use that on your reports to be like, all right, does created by equal the current user that's logged in, right? I think you're looking for more of like a filtering kind of thing to show specific data that a specific person is uploading, correct?
Right. On the
Yep.
interview.
Yeah. So there's a created by field on anything that has the entity framework. And if you need this created by field and you don't have it, you're not using the entity framework or objects that use the entity framework, you can always add it yourself and fill it in with the data from flow data, right? And you can fill that in, and then you can manage your reports to only show the filtered data down to whatever your user needs to see. So if you're showing accounts that have been created by someone, you can put a created by filter on there to filter by whoever's viewing it. So does that help?
Yeah, on the internal piece. Yeah, I'm thinking for my external piece, I'm wondering if I have to redesign my my entity architecture. And I'm wondering if I have to have entities created for each case, for each company. Anyway.
Maybe you might not have to. There's maybe a way we can do it where there would be like a logical kind of separation of data here. Put like a company ID on your data to separate it. That's perfectly fine. Or like a created by company or something like that. Happily, I'll happily look at it with you before you go making drastic changes there. So
appreciate it. Well, I'll contact you if I.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to me. Happy to get on a call and discuss. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Anything else? Speak now or forever hold your peace until tomorrow. All right, then this concludes the Decisions Lunch and Learn. Martin, I will reach out to you about your XML and we can kind of discuss more in detail about that. But other than that, everyone have a great afternoon. See you guys tomorrow.